Now, let's show you guys real quick how the fills work in the grooves, and then I'm going to show you guys how to go from scratch, because they're both worthy, and I don't think we've talked about fills even for the grooves too much. So, one thing that you should know about the fills that come with the grooves is that, except for this Monster Fills MIDI pack, which is fills only, for the most part, let's see here, you just pick something, you go to fills, you'll notice these are pretty short, but there's extra material added onto them. Like, in reality, all you might want is the da-da-dun at the end. But they give you the rest of the beat. And why do they give you the rest of the beat? Well, because a fill is all about the context. Like I was saying before, fill is all about getting from point A to point B. So there has to be some context in how you're going to get there, or else it's just a random fill. There's no point to it. So on these grooves, you'll notice that there's always a little bit of a beat ahead of time. Use it or don't use it. I usually don't. But all you do is you pull it in. Well, let's find a fill within this song that would work. A cool place for a fill. So we'll change that fill. This next beat, cool halftime. Let's do something better, because halftime to halftime. Okay. That in and of itself actually sounds kind of cool, having the pause. And something you guys should consider is that sometimes no fill is the best fill. But for the purpose of this situation, we're going to find a fill. I'm inclined to think that you just want something simple and easy, not too flashy, because the next part, it has the faster hi-hats. So to do something really flashy on the drums will take away from the next part. So you just want something that kind of says, this part's over, this is coming up. And fine. That might even be too much. So I'm going to a different set of grooves. See, that's just too much. So I'm going to go to a different library. There we go, that might be better. So, dragging that in, I've got a MIDI track down here. I'm just putting that right there. I don't want the beat that's attached to it, just the fill. So I insert that right there, and let's see. Now, I think rhythmically it's fine. I just personally would change what drums are being hit and their velocities. Like I think this tom is too high. So I'm going to go to a lower tom. And I don't like how varied these velocities are. Like I think that that's too all over the place. I'd rather have them closer together. So manually doing it. And mind you, this is not a metal track, so it's not important that the fill is like absolutely completely defined like you would hear in a death metal song, every last hit. This is purely about the feel of a transition. So that's how I would use a groove. Find one that kind of works, paste it in, alter it a little, change the velocity, maybe change what toms it's on, and you're good to go. Now, starting from scratch, I'm going to delete this. Like I said earlier, I kind of thought that no fill was the best fill for this part, but that said, I think to myself, so what would one of my favorite drummers do right here? Like what would Dave Grohl do in something like that? He'd probably do something simple, like pa-do-da-do-da into the part, something like that. So, how would I make that work? Let's see. Almost got it. I'll explain my thinking in a second. Whoops, that should be a floor tom. I think that'll sound better. Now, you notice when I copied stuff over, these velocities are ridiculous. So that is about to change. Putting the velocity of the snare underneath the velocity of the tom. And then, one thing I do know about when drummers play simple fills like that is that they're usually flamming the snare and the toms. Usually. So I'm going to move these guys over just a little bit, get a little bit of flam action happening. Let's see here.
Can you just explain what you mean by that for someone who might not be
What a flam is?
Yeah.
Okay. A flam is when you have two drums or two body parts hitting at the same time, basically, but off by just a hair. So like they're going in at the same time, but they're landing separately. So instead of, it's, so you hear that a lot in rock. It's the best way I can describe it. It's like, that's a flam. Instead of, so when you hear lots of those rock and roll fills where it's floor tom kick, snare and floor tom at the same time, like puta puta kind of stuff, there's some flamming going on between the floor tom and the snare.
So just another one of those slight little variations.
Yeah, and that's something you need to listen for when you're emulating your favorite drummers. Listen for when they're flamming stuff.
And so how exactly are you creating that here? Just dragging off the grid a bit?
Yeah, just dragging them off from each other, that's all. Nothing crazy. And now, I feel like this last bass drum hit, the velocity is good with it being low, but that velocity of the first bass drum hit in the next part should be higher. So, and a fill like that feels like it needs a crash at the end of it. That's what I would do. Why did I do that? Because I know what types of fills I like. So first thing I would think to myself there is, like I did, what would Dave Grohl do? Or what do I think he would do? I think he would just play something simple like that to get you to the next part. Nothing crazy. What are some cool, well-known Dave Grohl fills? Well, there's that one at the beginning of Smells Like Teen Spirit that's kind of like that. It's kind of his signature, so why not just try that, see what happens. That's all the thinking was, nothing deeper. I'm going to load up the metal song, though, and do some crazy fills right now. I think that's probably a good idea, and while it's loading up, we can do some Q&A. But
awesome.
let me just play this unsoloed with that fill. There you go. It's not very loud. I'm gonna turn it up a little, turn up the toms here. Anyways, that's a quickie on how to do that.
I like it. That's
That's-
going to be my new go-to sentence.
What would Dave Grohl do?
Yeah, what would Dave Grohl do?
It's a good question to ask. Let's see here. All right, going back to the metal song. Yeah, I mean, ask yourself that with any drummer. Every single musician that's walking around on the earth now is influenced by other musicians and is basically a collective of all his influences. So anybody who denies that or says that they're completely original just has some sort of a mental problem admitting the truth. So it's just good to say, all right, what would this awesome person do? Try it out. And that's how you'll develop your own style if you emulate enough different awesome people. And that's,
I like it. Well, that leads us to this question from Michael Goliath. As a guitarist, I sometimes find myself writing drums to the riff. Do you have any advice as a guitarist yourself getting into a drummer's state of mind?
yeah, learn some drum parts. I'm serious. Also, I was being serious, but one of the things that you want to think about is not the notes that the guitar is playing, but the feel that you're trying to establish. So where do you want to bob your head? Like, do you want to bob your head frequently or infrequently? Where? Like, how do you want the crowd to move? Like, what's it supposed to do rhythmically? And program the drums accordingly to that. Don't worry about the guitar notes. That's what I would do. But, and just to hammer this point in one more time, a good way to get that to an instinctual level is to learn drum beats by your favorite drummers. What would they do on the kind of part you're trying to put across? If you're trying to do a breakdown, well, who are your favorite breakdown drummers? What are your favorite breakdowns? What do they do? You know? Or who are your favorite breakdown drummers who don't match the riff every single time? That would be an interesting one to find out. Not too many.
There you go. My favorite breakdown drummer is Superior Drummer.
He's pretty tight.
We've got a couple questions about this, which are kind of along the same lines. One person is asking about bringing in MIDIs from Guitar Pro and making those feel humanized or feel more natural. Joe Gard also asks, how do you unquantize a selection or all punched in beats? So basically they're asking the same thing. Like, how do you take this pure mechanical MIDI data and make it sound humanized? You covered velocities. What about dragging off the grid and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, why don't you just start from scratch? That's what I would do. If I got a project in Guitar Pro, which was all MIDI drums, and I thought that it just sounded like drum machine crap, I would delete it and start from scratch. I don't personally, I don't believe in fixing crap. I believe in starting with something that's great or create.
This reminds me of the part in the in that Metallica movie where Lars asks his dad, like, "So what do you think of our new
Delete
song?"
it. Yeah. Hey, I mean, I'm sure that's not the answer that guy is looking for. He probably wants me to say, well, you can, there's some sort, like in Beat Detective, when we're editing drums, for instance, in the conform option, you see right here, there's strength and a percentage. So like when we make the drums conform, we can say 81%, and so it'll be 81% to the grid, as opposed to 100% to the grid. And every DAW has similar functions, humanized functions for MIDI. So yes, you can just run that, but it's just like the randomizer that I showed for velocities. It's an algorithm, and it's not a human being. I would advise use that Guitar Pro MIDI as kind of like a template, kind of like a demo, and go from scratch. Sorry. That's what I would do if they came to me to record. I would start from scratch. I'm not going to fix their crappy MIDI.
All right, do you want to go and do more fills, or do you want to take another question?
Take another question
What
while
would
I'm
Dave
getting this
Grohl
going.
do right now? I don't know. Take another question?
Yeah, you take another question.
Nobody thought that was funny? Okay.
I laughed on the
All right,
inside.
thanks. I appreciate that, Finn. Okay, Echo Deck said, Eyal, do you find yourself varying a BPM level in a session? Say like 122 beats per minute for verses, and then speed up 2 or 3 beats per minute for the choruses to make it feel like a real drummer. I've noticed when programming Ringo Starr grooves, changing the tempos will achieve that real drummer feel. However, my question is, how would you do it, and what is the fastest way?
Absolutely. There is no fast way because it's got repercussions down the line. Whereas if time is a factor in your session, like say you only have 2 weeks or 3 weeks to do the whole album, and you have 3 choruses in every single song that are the same, well, guess what? If you're changing your tempos a lot, there could be a problem. Like, or if you have a riff that comes in at one point in the song, but it's 3 BPM faster at another point in the song, guess what? You got to redo it. There's no copy paste. I mean, definitely if the choruses are all 125, cool, then you copy paste those and you're fine. But just realize that when you go down that path, you're opening up a whole new amount of work that could be more than you ever anticipated, and that could throw your project back. However, that said, I think it's amazing to do that stuff. And I would do it on every single record if I had the time to do it, and I have done it whenever I possibly can, because I think that drummers naturally will speed up and slow down by a few BPM, depending on the section of the song. A halftime part down by like 2 to 5 BPM, a double time part up by 2 or 3. Just those small little changes make all the difference in the world. So yes, if you have the time, do it. Just remember, it really will come back to bite you in the ass later when you're tracking everything else. So be sure that you have the time to follow through. So let's see. It's a pretty cool fill at the beginning of this. Trying to find a spot where a cool fill would be cooler than what we did.
I think all the notes are already used up in this song, sorry.
They are,
You
aren't
ran
they?
out.
I'm gonna redo this one. All right, so I'm trying to think. Again, like, what would a drummer that I like do right here? And I was thinking something like something like that, which is kind of a precursor to what's coming up next in the toms, setting up the tom part. So this is the tom part. in the world of books, which is something that do exist, it's called foreshadowing. So I would do a foreshadowing kind of fill. At least that would be my first instinct. So, dun 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 dun. I can't really do it because I'm not that skilled. But come on. Well, if it doesn't want to cooperate, there's only one way around this, which is to go from scratch. Doesn't want to draw in fills. That's fine. I'll trick the machine.
I will trick the machine.
Yes. Sometimes you have to trick the machine. Okay. Let's see if the machine is willing to be tricked now. All right. See you later. And here's a hit we can start with. So, what I was singing in my head, I believe, we'll see, would be this pattern, I think. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm thinking of a pattern. Now, reality is, and a lot of people need to understand this, so what they hear in their head isn't necessarily what's actually happening in the world. So you need to test everything. A lot of people don't get this, and I encounter this in the studio a lot, like, but I heard it in my head a certain way. What's going on? It's like, well, your head's not accurate. So you have to test your theories out.
If you want gentle bedside manner, this is not your guy. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Almost got it. Again, I'm just trying to kind of foreshadow what's coming up. And I'm making some decisions. Something along those lines. Now, those velocities are jacked because they're way too high. There we go. But because I did a fill there and it goes into a tom part, I'm going to change how the tom part starts. To add maybe a double china on the first hit. We'll see. I gotta find the china first. That's the first step. Nope. I veto that one. Seems to me like something a drummer might play. Cool. So played from here. Once again, all I was really doing is doing something kind of in the style of what's coming next. That's not crazy flashy because the beat, there's no room for that. There's enough information going on. The tempo of the song's not very high, and we already did a crazy flashy fill at the beginning of the song. So doing too much of that just turns the brain off. So yeah, trying to get from point A to point B in a way that makes sense. There you go. And I'll note also that that fill I just did, which I could still tweak further, obviously, but time is a factor right now. Not only is it foreshadowing the toms, but it is also based on the kick pattern that's going on. So it's based on the song. It's not just some random drum hits. Listen to the kick patterns.